And I saw your email real quick, so I'll make sure I get an update from you before you got to buzz off.
All right, thank you.
All right, so I've got teed up three folks that can kind of speak a little bit about what's going on in our legislative session. Last month, Carolyn Logue was kind enough to give us an update, and things are kind of moving fast, and now it's about over. So first, the three that I have, and I don't know if anyone has a time crunch and says just shout out if you do, but we do have Shawn Bunney here who will talk a lot about the transportation package in particular. We also have Nate Kaplan, who is with the rail services, and then we have Shawn Egan, who may have some updates from the port, some announcements that I just saw yesterday that I asked to have someone present on. So, and then of course we will, circulate around any other of our legislators. I see Representatives Cynthia Jacobson, good morning. I know you're busy, so also whoever I need to get to you, just let me know. So I guess with that, any Shawn, Nate, or Shawn, either of the Shawns?
You want just to, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, just making sure somebody, I didn't organize us well enough with a specific agenda at a specific time. And sometimes some of you have other important things to get to.
Let me go ahead and go first, because I think Mr. Egan may be a good cleanup hitter. He has a lot of more global insights than I do. I kind of focus on the projects and asks that I'm working on for clients, and the port has a lot of transportation sideboards as well. So I'll go ahead and just rip if that's okay.
Perfect. Let's rip.
Okay. So I think if you talk about transportation this year, you kind of have to look back to connecting Washington and the length of time that it's taken to get another package. And the legislature has historically done packages every 5 or 6 years. And so in this particular case, we were going into session in the fall with Chair Hobbs, who's a senator in Snohomish County, and then in Pierce County, Jake Fye is the House chair. And I would say that most of the pundits were not terribly optimistic about getting a package together, partly because just getting all of the four corners of the legislature to balance out the Republicans and the Democrats and the leadership on both sides. And it's a short session, and there have been attempts the last couple of years from the House and the Senate to put packages out. With that being said, there were some unique pressures this year that I think have led to a package being rolled out and quite honestly on the cusp of being passed in some form as we speak. Early in February, a new chair, Marco Leos, and Chair Fye rolled out a joint chair proposal, which is somewhat unique in the way that packages or anything is developed. When you have both the House and the Senate chairs together, you have a lot more viable package. And they called it a Move Ahead Washington package. The chairs were looking to change the paradigm in the way that transportation was funded, given the lack of reliability of the gas tax as people convert to less to electric and more efficient automobiles. And so in their package, they were able to use, for the first time that I know of, a large chunk of general fund revenues, $2 billion in state revenues, out of $11 billion in surplus. They also were able to use a variety of fee increases, but the big new revenue source is from the Climate Act last year, and it's a 6 cent a gallon petroleum tax on all in-state petroleum produced in the county, as well as petroleum that is exported from the county, which remember that point of the export tax, because I think that's the one wrinkle that they've got to get over to get a package put together. The package is very transit centered and active transportation centered. They have $3 billion in new transit projects. They have $3 billion in maintenance, which has been a past deficit in the state for quite a long time. They also have $1 billion in electrifying ferries and other electrical improvements. I think more of the focus that I've been on, and I think the port and others are on the transportation highway investments. In the package, they make up some past deficits from inflation and cost overruns. Specifically to our interest is the Gateway project, and the package does, out of $1.4 billion in existing infrastructure investments, they have $433 million to catch up the Gateway project, which, as we know, is the 167 to the Port of Tacoma, but also the 509 project off of SeaTac Airport to I-5. So that is something that we desperately need to keep rolling on. And then as far as new investments, there's a very limited number of about 29 projects that are attached to the new revenue package or separate legislative spending. And out of that 2.6 billion, the lion's share of it, $1 billion goes to building a new Columbia River crossing. Closer to home, they have another $325 million to go to I-5 JBLM. They have another $500 million that goes to widening of the Highway 18, which I'm not familiar exactly where that project is, but anything on Highway 18, my experience has been is a benefit to Pierce County as we run freight up and down. And then they have a few small projects on that list, and I'm going to wait until I talk about kind of the local projects in East Pierce County to talk about the small project list. But to wrap up kind of where this package, and it really is kind of phenomenal that they've been able to roll out a package and move it this far. One of the ways that they did that is they developed a package that did not require bonding, that would not require any Republican participation, and that they have not used Republican participation in developing the package. So it's pretty much the D's working together on the House and the Senate leadership to push this package forward. As the package came out on the floor, there had been a lot of work done by interests that, including the states of Alaska and Oregon, and maybe Idaho, that care very much about us adding a 6-cent a gallon petroleum tax on top of exports going to their states. I'm not sure who else was involved in that lobby, but it was looked at as somewhat legally novel to be able to reach out to other states and suck money back in for pollution or carbon that they'd created in our state. And that on the floor of the House, they removed the cap and trade, the export cap and trade provision, which leaves them with a $2 billion hole to fix in this transportation package. And as it rolled out of the House and the Senate, wasn't any reconciliation yet. And so it goes to what they call conference. And that's where the two chairs and the minority leaders sit down and they try to come up with a vision that will work to move forward. At RAMP last week, a lot of speculation, but I think that one of the takeaways is that they've worked awfully hard and there's a lot of political will to pass something this year, and a lot of good reasons to do that too. I think one of the revenue sources I did not mention was the federal infrastructure money, which needs to be allocated, as well as kind of the pressure on the transportation budget. So anyway, they're in the process of sorting out the new revenue package as well as the supplemental budget, and any differences will be decided by them in the next day and a half. So Tara, you asked what can be done. I'm not quite sure at this point. It seems like it's pretty close to the lap of the gods when it goes into conference and you kind of run around and talk to people and say, have you heard anything? What do you know? Given limited time, let me quickly talk about East Pierce County and the work that we've been doing. My client in transportation for the last... Yes.
Can I interrupt you just for a second? I saw Representative Jacobson had her hand up, and I know there is a point of the SPUI at Meridian that may be falling short, and so maybe she may be addressing that and or have her own question about it.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Just real quick, great update. We did in the House pass a raid on the Public Works Trust Fund instead of the excise tax, so that was swell, and it passed along party lines. With the Republicans a no. So they're raiding the Public Works Trust Fund, and I think that's what's going to be the plan. And then there's $2 billion in new taxes. And then the full SPUI in Puyallup, which is a fun word, is in question on the Gateway project. So I was on the phone all day about that yesterday, in between stuff. It sounds like they're going to do a diamond interchange, and no one in Puyallup is happy with that. And the interesting thing about that is we had a memorandum of understanding that $2 million that we would give them would be dependent on the full SPUE. So that's all up in the air right now. So just adding that to your lovely update. Thank you.
Thank Representative Jacobson. I do think that the Public Works Trust Fund is why I think it's kind of I missed that point, and questions as to whether the Senate would support that or not. A Public Works Trust Fund, as you probably know, is monies local governments use to backfill and get low financing for their various public works projects. So just real quickly, in East Pierce County, we have one of two projects in Pierce County and East Pierce County on the new project list, and that's the 162-410 interchange. And it's one of very few small projects, but there's $7 million in the new budget for that interchange to do phase one, which will be dueling roundabouts and keep the existing overpass for now, and then a phase two that will come later. In addition, I think that in East Pierce County, I represent Tahali, Brookfield Properties, who are building a 10,000 home master plan community. And our interest as we build a new corridor off of the Bonnie Lake Plateau is to make sure 162 operates well, which requires investment from the developer, which we're putting $30 million into that corridor, but also investment from the state to make up what we consider to be past or needed investments that are unrelated to the development. And I would say it's about a $50 million ask when you put all of the different pieces together. The $7 million becomes a good start. We're looking at north-south. We want the 162-410 interchange to work well, but we also want 166th Street in front of where Corliss Resources mine and all of that to work well. They were able to get a $500,000 design allocation made to that project in the supplemental, which isn't final yet, but they're in both the House and the Senate. And then in addition, in the last couple of years, there's been a huge discussion about east-west connectivity. And up in the South Hill area is probably the most congested area in the whole county going out 20 years without a lot of good solutions. And so Representative Kirby, of all people, put a study together from 161 over to I-5, which is Meridian. We have asked and were given in the House a $500,000 allocation to study the 161 to 162 segment, which we think is part of the solution for South Hill, but it also is part of the congestive relief. So again, we're looking at improving north-south and east-west off of 162. And we have the east-west study in, and we've got the $7 million for the interchange in this package, and we've got 166th Street design money in there. So there's quite a bit in there, in my opinion, working this for a half a dozen years for East Pierce County this year. And it's a sign that the cities and the county and the people that live in the valley and Tahali and other business interests have worked hard together to kind of put these projects on the map. And I will add that it does appear as though they put very little local kinds of last mile projects and other things that were historically on the chair's lists in past proposals. And so my guess is, and my understanding is that this is kind of a first big project package, and that the next couple of years we'll be coming back and doing quite a bit more in the way of transportation funding. I'll stop there. You might want to go to Mr. Egan. I bet he's got a lot of extra thoughts on transportation to be a good transition.
He always does. I may pause just for a second. I know I had asked Nate Kaplan at last minute. He's the Washington State Director for GoRail to join us this morning, and he's got to bounce to something real quick. So we're going to do a little bouncing, if that's okay with you, Shawn.
No
Shawn,
problem.
You're always on the fly, ready to go. You can bring us right back. So again, Nate Kaplan, Washington State Director of the GoRail.org. has some asks of this group, and we've been actively helping advocate on part of that aspect of transportation. So Nate, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks, Tara, and thanks for everybody for giving me some time and attention today. I hope to meet all of you in person eventually when we can travel again. My job was doing a lot of travel before COVID, but obviously now everything's been kind of moved to Zoom and phone calls. And so I am the Washington State and Oregon and California and Nevada representative for GoRail. We represent all of the 7 major Class 1 railroads in the United States. So in Washington, that would be BNSF and Union Pacific are the big ones. And there's about 20 other short line railroads that comprise about 3,000 miles of active rail lines in Washington State. And as you well know, Washington is a very much an export economy. I think every year it's like tied to second with Vermont for some reason, as far as the per capita dependence on exports of any state in the United States, as Washington is the most important. Now, freight rail doesn't usually make headlines unless it's something awful that's going on. It's kind of like airplane crashes. You don't hear about it, airplanes, until there's a crash. Well, there's a lot of other stuff that's always going on in the background with railroads that doesn't make headlines, but is equally important than anything else that you're going to hear about or read about. And our big issue is coming up actually this week. I've been working for the rail for about 6 years now. And our biggest policy issue is culminating to a hearing that's taking place on Friday. And my ask, and what I was hoping that the committee could consider, is signing on to a group letter that I could send to Tara again or recirculate that would oppose a policy that is going to be decided in the next few weeks. I'm going to back up a little bit to give some context of how we got here and what the issue is. And then hopefully it all makes sense, and happy to take any questions now or in the next few days too. So railroads in the United States are all privately owned and maintained, for the exception of a handful of short lines that are owned by municipalities. So what that means is ever since the 1800s, railroads have been investing their own money and their own human power to keep the network going. As everybody knows, been memorialized in books and movies and TV shows, that railroads dominated transportation from the 1800s up and through World War II. After World War II, everything changed when the interstate freeway system was built. Nobody could kind of predict the societal shift that was going to happen in the 1950s when people could buy their own vehicle and drive from place to place. Aviation became cheaper and safer at the same time. So passengers levels dropped in the United States big time for rail, as more people gravitated towards airplanes and flying from city to city. But on the freight side, which we represent, there's a big shift now, because now trucks had a publicly subsidized way of moving freight across land. And so what ended up happening was they took a major chunk out of the business of the railroads at the time, and still is the case today. After all the cards have kind of been laid on the table, trains move about 35% of all freight volume in the US, and trucks move about 60%. And then airplanes and boats move about 5% total. Anyway, so from the 1950s up until 1980, there was a window that most people don't realize or think about, where the federal government actually essentially operated the railroads, even though they were still privately held companies. So Union Pacific or BNSF wasn't able to set their own rates. You had a federal bureaucracy that was meeting every quarter and setting the rate for how much it was going to cost to move potatoes from, say, Spokane to Salt Lake City, or whatever. Name your commodity, name your distance. It was no longer during that 30-year window set by the railroads and the customer. It was set by the federal government, and it went horribly wrong. Big surprise, the federal government taking over a freight rail network in the United States, it did not work well. So what ended up happening is, in the late 1970s, there was derailments happening everywhere. The entire network in the United States was in shambles. Because the federal government wasn't in a position to know what investment needed to take place in certain locations. If Tara was shipping one carload of grain a week but Shawn was shipping 10 a week, you're still paying the same per carload. There's no economy of scale. So something had to change in 1980, and Congress knew it. So the big issue that Congress was debating at the time was to either nationalize the entire railroads and take it over, or to deregulate the economics, meaning allow railroads to set their own rates and routes again, allow them to abandon lines that were no longer profitable, create a short line system, spin off little sections of line to an entrepreneur who might want to, run a grain elevator and have their own railroad connecting to a larger class one, moving it thousands of miles. And so that was the argument that won the day, was deregulation. And this historic piece of legislation for railroad people is called the Staggers Act of 1980, which is just named after Congressman Harley Staggers from West Virginia, who had that vision of, hey, this is the United States, free market economics should work, let's see what happens. And fast forward to today, and it was by far, it's a case study of how deregulation can really work in the United States, where the US has the cheapest rates of freight rail in the planet. We have the safest trains, meaning the least accidents and derailments of any other country per capita. And now we have the most high-tech trains too. And this meaning, all trains are talking to each other. After that horrible Amtrak incident, when positive train control was not installed, I think that's in 2018, a lot of things have changed since then. And now positive train control is installed in every single train in the United States, and they're all talking to each other. Not light rail, just the heavy rail stuff, and the passenger commuter lines and the freight rail lines. So everything's kumbaya, everything's going well, except back in 2016, one of our biggest customers, which is the chemical industry, got to our federal regulator, which is called the U.S. Surface Transportation Board. It used to be called the Interstate Commerce Commission. It's the oldest regulator in America, and they changed their name in 1990 to the Surface Transportation Board. Anyhow, and railroads are also are the only mode of freight transportation that is referred to as a common carrier. That means we have to move everything that is brought to us, doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's a federally legal substance. That means you can't move cannabis, but you can move oil, you can have to move nuclear waste, you have to move whatever it is that a customer wants to bring to a railroad. They have to get it from A to B as quickly and as efficiently and as cost effectively as possible. And that goes back to the 1860s, where railroads were not able to shrug off a customer because they were in a position back then to create mini monopolies if they were serving one lumberyard, but decided not to service the other lumberyard next door. You'd shut them out of business. So fast forward to 2016, Dow Chemical and DuPont really essentially they use the railroads as like a moving storage facility for their stuff, their chemicals, because it's cheaper and easier than building warehouse facilities all across the United States where this stuff is being used for products. So they want cheaper rates, but they don't care how long it takes to get from A to B. But everybody else using the network does care. So they came up with this idea of having the federal government take back over the rates and routes of the railroads like they did prior to 1980, and have a system that's more of like a utility style system where Union Pacific has to open up its tracks to BNSF or vice versa. And now the federal government would be the final arbitrator of who's moving what and who's charging what. Now, this is a total kind of upside down reversal of how the business plan of a railroad has operated for 200 years, minus that 30-year window from the 50s to 1980, where where all of the companies would have to share their equipment and their tracks. And now the Surface Transportation Board, a 5-member presidential appointee commission in DC, would be the ones making the decision of who's moving on whose line and on when and who's charging what. Now, if you are a railroad, and you are considering double tracking a section that's going to cost $100 million so you can have more commuter lines or better fluidity, you're not going to do that if now your competitor is going to have the same access to it and paid nothing for it. And so it's this huge sort of power grab, really, between industry titans, where you're having Union Pacific versus Dow Chemical or DuPont. And DuPont wants cheaper rates, but the market doesn't bear it, and they're already paying the cheapest rates on the planet. So this issue's been the can has been kicked down the road up until Friday. So back in 2017, we had 1,000, when this issue first came up, 1,000 legislators, mayors, chambers of commerce all signed a letter opposing this policy. The commission at the time said, okay, we're going to hit the brakes on this and not deal with it or put it on the back burner. Biden kind of resurrected this back in November when he had a slew of executive orders come out. And one of them was pertaining to the railroads, and it was this issue: should the federal government have more authority over the rates and routes of railroads? And if a shipper asks to, another analogy, because this kind of stuff is sometimes difficult to explain verbally, but another analogy would be forcing Target to sell Walmart's products at a price that the federal government sets that's below market rate. So it's, or having, sending a postcard from say Tacoma to Washington, DC, but having UPS take it from Seattle to Salt Lake, and then FedEx take it from Salt Lake to New York, but paying only the USPS price for it. The federally government mandated pricing is the issue that would really have reverberations across the industry and just change the entire way that commuter rails and freight rails operate. So that being said, we've been working on this we've been focusing on certain states. Washington's a big state, California's a big state, and we are generating these letters that are statewide that are asking the Surface Transportation Board to reconsider this idea that the hearing is set for Friday. So we're going to be testifying, as is every other railroad in the United States, many shippers. And then the Dow Chemicals, they're represented by the American Chemistry Council, which is a very powerful lobbying force in DC. And so they're going to be saying, hey, we want to have more access to different rail lines. Even if one company doesn't own it, we want another company to operate it if we can get a cheaper rate from the federal government. So hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, Tara, it's it's a big issue. We don't think about railroads every day, but hopefully if this is something that's in your wheelhouse, we'd love to have your support. The Thurston County Chamber recently signed on, so did the South Seattle Chamber. And so this is the big one for us, because it would change and alter the way that operations are. And the reason why, I should just say real quick, you don't want to do this, because it might sound, when I say we do, it's called forced access. So you're forcing a switch from one company's line onto another. This is something that can take hours and sometimes days to do, to have that switch take place, because operationally you're reshuffling the train and rebuilding it. And everyone behind who's using it, whether you're shipping goods from the Port of Olympia or you're moving commuters across the state on a train, then you're all clogged up and stuck behind that train that is now doing that forced access switch that the federal government mandated for that particular day. So
yeah, no, thank you for that. You provided great context. I also forwarded the initial letter you sent in February that kind of broke down the scenario and the ask to the group while you were speaking. So I don't know if it makes sense to anyone. I mean, I know we're going to sign on. I'm willing to sign that letter on behalf of our chamber. This group, do you want individuals with their organizations or their affiliations to maybe respond to me to be added, or just?
That would be incredible. It's, with the more the merrier with these sort of things. The more weight, the more names, the more organizations, it has more gravitas to these sort of letters. So that would be amazing if to have the chamber sign on one and to have individual members would go a really long way and would be incredibly helpful. Big time.
Great. And then are there any clarifying questions from the group at all?
The hearing that's happening Friday, is it a done deal when this happens? Is a decision going to be made and then the fate of this?
Good question. No, it's definitely not a done deal. So there's, like I said, it's a 5-member commission of presidential appointees. So there's whoever's in the White House controls the chair. So there's 3 Dems and 2 Republicans. And right now, and last year or 2 years ago, was reverse. So they could totally eliminate it and drop it like we're hoping. They could create some amended version of it, or they could adopt this policy outright, which would probably be followed by lawsuits or a lot of different things that would try to, derail it because of the implications it'll have on operations. So any of those 3 things could happen, really. And if it wasn't clear, this isn't a bill that's going through Congress, that's going through a transportation committee and infrastructure and Senate Commerce. It's very sort of insulated. It's happening it's the rule-making process by a federal agency, which is also giving us heartburn that most of the public isn't hearing about this because it's not going to be on the House. It's not a bill. It's not something that most people are being informed about because it's this regulatory action by a very small, misunderstood or unknown agency, which is the Surface Transportation Board.
There's 2 questions in the chat.
Yeah.
From Felicia Waugh and Hannah Thomas. Are you seeing those? Are you going to read them for you?
So I see, as far as the 35% number, railroads would love to move more, of course, yes. And they have, I wouldn't say unlimited capacity, but they will take as much as they can get. And it's because, you're not competing with, regular normal traffic on the freeway. You can move this stuff a lot safer, a lot quicker, a lot more efficiently on privately owned and maintained tracks. And not to mention environmental impacts. Trains get about 500 miles on 1 gallon of fuel, moving 1 ton of freight these days. So they emit a lot less greenhouse gases as trucks do. And of course, the traffic situation, you can alleviate a lot. One train can take anywhere between 200 to 500 trucks off the road, depending on how long that train is.
Great.
Yeah.
And then did you see Hannah's question there about would there be further impact on the supply chain bottlenecks with the proposed change?
Oh, big time. And that's one of our arguments is like, how are you even considering this right now after, like, did you not pay attention in November, December, January, where, you have still ships waiting out at harbor in the ports of LA and Long Beach because you have truck shortages and you have this huge bottleneck, and that was impacting things in Chicago big time. So yeah, we're still not past this sort of COVID hiccup of bottlenecks on the supply chain, and to introduce this policy would just almost make that a permanent situation, because from 1 week to the next, you wouldn't know. Maybe you're used to having a train go by or hearing a train at 11 p.m. at night. Well, that might switch to 7 p.m. the following week, and that might end up being 2 a.m. the next week. And it's all now the federal government making those decisions instead of the railroad and its customer. I see some other good, funny questions here. Yeah, the 500 miles per gallon. So 1 gallon, they're still using diesel, but they're now BNSF is kind of leading the way on hybrid electric technology. They're testing a hybrid rail train between Barstow and Stockton, California, where they're probably getting over 1,000 miles on 1 gallon of fuel, moving 1 ton of freight. And the hydrogen power is kind of what they're seeing as the future 20 years out, is possibly moving stuff by hydrogen. So yeah, trains are much more environmentally friendly, not even a comparison to trucks. But that wasn't always the case. In 1990, trains were only getting about 190 miles on a gallon of fuel. So that is increased because the technology is improved and companies are able to invest in their own way on making that more fuel efficient and safer.
So Nate, we're making some headway here. Carolyn Logue, who is our lobbyist of 8 chambers, she got the letter that I just sent to her, and she just is asking all of the executives of the 8 chambers if they're willing to sign on for the South Sound Chamber of Commerce Legislative Coalition. So I'll let you know on that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It means a lot. And this is the kind of stuff that makes a difference. It seems like FYI Rep Strickland, I think, is on our side on this. She has indicated that in previous meetings. She understands the concept, and and obviously she's very important, vote and person. Serves on the Transportation Committee, which oversees the Surface Transportation Board. So having support from your region is huge.
Awesome. Well, that was, great and perfect timing, right?
Yeah. Well, and if anybody wants a history lesson on rail, believe me, I've ended up, for better or worse, become a real rail geek in history. And so I'm always happy to answer questions online or offline. I could talk about this stuff all day. So. Yeah.
So again, just anyone who is interested with your organization, just respond back to that email and I'll make sure he gets everybody's name, organization, and title correct. But thank you so much, Nate. I know Ryan Windish is got to go, and I would love to hear from Sumner. So we'll get back to Shawn Squared in a minute here, Shawn, keeping you at your seats there. But Ryan, thank you. And again, thanks so much, Nate.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tara. I do need to run to another meeting, so just wanted to give a quick update on what's going on in Sumner. The council is planning on doing a retreat on Friday, which will focus on budget priorities. So we are going through our budget process this year, and they'll be meeting to discuss priorities in terms of how it reflects, obviously, into the budget. The council's been discussing some different affordable housing initiatives. One is whether or not to adopt an expansion to our multifamily tax exemption program. We currently allow it in our town center area, and we've had some robust discussions around whether to expand that or not. We also are looking at expanding senior housing, affordable senior housing options in town, and they will probably be taking action on that in April. We'll also be opening up for an annual comprehensive plan amendment cycle. Actually, it's open right now for applications, and we'll see if we get any private applications. We started our hybrid council meetings. Last night was the first one. Had a few, as you could imagine, a few technical glitches, but overall I thought it went really smooth, and we'll be moving into that, continuing in that format for the foreseeable future. Council also discussed a fiber optics study that has been completed, looking at connecting all city facilities with a fiber optics cable that have a lot of bandwidth and be setting us up for capacity for the future. It's about a $2.3 million investment. So that's one of the things council needs to grapple with as part of the budgeting process. Council also adopted a parks improvement plan. It's basically prioritizes parks projects, and they're been reviewing the master plans for both our Siebenthaler Park and the Bennett property, which is coming right along. To build those parks out as planned, though, it's about $10 million per park. So that's some more things the council gets to grapple with in the budgeting process. And finally, I wanted to hit a couple of interesting and exciting new development projects that are happening. The YMCA is working on a Airnasium project, which is a covered recreational area, about 16,000 square feet. And there's also about 1.5 acres of field that would go with that. They're working through design review. They have a sizable donation and partnership with some community members to make that happen. The library continues to move forward, and we'll be breaking ground later this year is the plan. And also we have an assisted living facility, Kinsman Care, at 5019 East Valley Highway. They have a 15,000 square foot, 40 bed facility that they are going through design review on. So we're excited to see that move forward. And then Phil Mitchell, who owns the Sunset Auto Group, he has a project, he calls it Phil's Speed Shop. It's I think it's in order to store his personal auto collection, but it's an auto club apparently as well. So he's looking at about a 17,000 square foot building. It's an addition in town where the old National Auto Parts used to be. So we're excited to have a lot going on. We also have multifamily that I've mentioned numerous times continues to move forward. So those are the quick highlights of what we got going on in Sumner.
Great. Great. Any questions for Ryan? All right. Well, thank you, Ryan. I know you're going to need to buzz off, but I appreciate you being there. Congratulations for being one of our official public partners at our Champions of Commerce too. Appreciate your advocacy and support the last 3 years that this team has been together. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Honor.
You bet. All right, Shawn, back at ya. Let's bring us back to transportation and also tell us some good news that's down at the port about some of the clean air practices.
There you go. So real quick, and just going back to the package, my good colleague, Mr. Bunney, correctly noted that this package is a very transit heavy package, but I think it's important to understand where the funding comes from, and that sort of drives a big chunk of that. You may recall that the legislature last year passed the Climate Commitment Act, a cap and trade mechanism for dealing with greenhouse gas emissions, and that generates a chunk of revenue. And when you look at the package, they are taking that Climate Commitment Act dollars to pay for transit. Whether one supported Climate Commitment Act or not, whether one agrees that the money should be exclusively used for climate reduction activities or not, it's just a recognition of that. That explains why this package has so much money going to transit. It's because it's all that Climate Commitment Act dollars. And that's somewhere in the neighborhood, if I remember, of like a $5.1 billion over the 16-year life of the package. So there's a natural reason for that. And there's also another natural reason why I think you're not seeing as many of the smaller projects like Shawn referred to. It's because of some of the pressures that he made reference to in the beginning of his comments. The revenue being collected under the Connecting Washington package is down. It's just not keeping pace. And it's not keeping pace either because we're moving to more fuel efficient vehicles. People are working from home, things like that. And so they're taking a big chunk of the money, somewhere in the neighborhood of about $2 billion of the package, simply to backfill Connecting Washington. So you're not getting anything new. You're just trying to keep your existing promises. Then you've got the Supreme Court order with fish culverts. Supreme Court came down and said, WashDOT, you need to replace all of your culverts that are blocking fish packages. So that's not really a sexy sort of thing that we all get excited about when it comes to transportation, but it's an obligation. So that takes off a chunk of money. The ferry service, we've seen all the stories about how that's in shambles. They're needing to take off a chunk of money to deal with that. And then there is a maintenance backlog. And some people would have wanted more, but still $3 billion is a historic investment in maintenance. All of these things are sort of like when you're building your house, it's the things that you gotta do that aren't the things you get excited about. We get excited about the new furniture or the paint or some of the cool features. You don't get excited about the flashing for your roof or the plumbing or what have you, but those are the things you have to do. And this package is a lot of that. In many respects, I'm actually surprised with the amount of, quote, new highway projects that they have been able to jam into this package. But this just helps you understand some of the pressures and why the package sort of looks the way it does. Representative Jacobson made a good point. One of the things that they have been scrambling to try to figure out over the last several days, and we're still waiting for the final answer, is a $2 billion hole that was created last week. As Shawn correctly pointed out, part of the funding mechanism was a tax on exported fuel. As fuel is refined at the refineries like up at Anacortes and what have you, and sent out of state, they want to try and tax that fuel. The House said no, they pulled that off the table. As Representative Jacobson correctly noted, what they put on the table was a diversion of $1.5 billion from the Public Works Trust Fund. We then were told that the Senate said that was dead on arrival in their chamber. They put on the table the notion of rating the Model Toxics Control Act funds. These are funds that are tied to taxes on toxics that are used for various environmental programs. They were specifically going to try and raid the portion of the operating budget where MOTCA goes to. I then heard that the House said that is dead on arrival. And so now they've got a $2 billion hole. And so that's where they were at going into the weekend, and everyone went into, the closed back rooms to try to figure how to come out with this. I don't know what they're going to come up with. If I were to speculate, and this is Shawn speculating, and for those of you who know me, usually my speculations are wrong. So take this for a grain of salt. I think you will see additional money coming out of the operating budget. Maybe not the full $2 billion, but I think you will see some additional money. I would not be shocked if they still divert some, but not as much from the Public Works Trust Fund. I would not be shocked if they diverted some, but not all from MOTCA. So you might have a combination of those. You might see some of the new projects get slimmed down. There might be something else in there, but I think you're going to see some sort of a hybrid model at the end of the day. In terms of timing, we are hearing rumors that the capital budget, just separate from kind of all the stuff we've been talking about, it may be released today. I have heard the operating budget may be released tonight or tomorrow morning. No word on transportation, but given that these budgets are all far more intimately tied together than they ever have been, I'm imagining that's all going to pop. They need time to get those sort of unveiled, because once they reach a deal, you need staff to basically go write this. And these are complex documents. And then you've got to churn it through the process very quickly so that they can adjourn Thursday by midnight. I think they're going to get done, but I just don't know exactly what it's going to look like. So I'll stop talking there on that. Happy to answer questions. And then if there's a few extra, 30 seconds now or later, I did want to riff on one thing about the port, but I'll leave it there on the state.
Any questions for Shawn? I say riff away on your good news that I got yesterday from Leslie Barstow.
Sure. So one of the things that the Port of Tacoma has taken pride in is obviously our economic development initiatives, right? We are here to be able to create jobs and create prosperity for the entire Puget Sound region. But as we've done this, we've always wanted to make sure that we are being a good neighbor, and we have tried to demonstrate environmental leadership in our efforts. And a good example of this is our commitment to be able to reduce air emissions associated with marine cargo activity over time. So one of the really cool things was, actually this was last week, we unveiled the first all-electric yard handling equipment at one of our facilities. It's called the South Intermodal Rail Yard. It is one of those rail yards where we are directly transferring containers to and from trains. And as you're doing that, you need equipment there to be able to move those containers around and load them onto the trains and whatnot. We were just made a $2.2 million investment into these all-electric vehicles. They were actually put into service last week. We're very excited about that. It is a small step. It's going to reduce about 259 tons of year in terms of carbon emissions. Not a huge amount, right? But it is a step in the right direction. We have seen a lot of individuals and a lot of governments and a lot of businesses promise we will reduce emissions. But the question is, what do we see in terms of tangible action? This is another example of something that we have done in terms of tangible action. Another really cool project, we're currently under construction to put in shore power at the Husky Container Terminal. Again, some real world examples of us trying to be able to reduce our air emissions. So we're happy about that. And I think I have yacked way too much, so I will wrap it up.
You're awesome. I appreciate it. Shawn and Shawn Show brought to you by the Puyallup Sumner Chamber of Commerce. All right, let's thank you again, Representative Jacobson. And then we also have from Senator Gildon's office, Kaylin Jensen. So anything you guys have been having fun with lately?
Thanks, Tara. As you're hearing, it's evolving. So three of us I'm getting pieces of information from Shawn that I didn't have about how things are evolving. Basically, overarching, we have three budgets. We passed the operating budget, we have the capital budget, and in the House, we passed all these, the capital budget and the transportation budget. And the operating budget, we had a $15 billion surplus. We didn't lower any taxes. We spent so much that we didn't even backfill our rainy day fund, which we rated last year, last session. So that was a disappointment to the minority party. We wanted to do that. The transportation budget, we wanted to take the fish culverts and get that out of the transportation budget so that they would have enough money. And we wanted to permanently put in, we only had a half, but we could put in all of the sales tax on new cars for the transportation budget. That's a logical nexus, and that didn't happen. So we spent a lot in the transportation budget, and the main thing that I'm working on right now with that is just trying to make sure that we're getting what we promised, with the Gateway project. So that's good. Capital is a little less controversial, so hopefully we'll see some projects in Puyallup from that. And I mean, it's been covered. That's kind of the direction it's taken, and we just have a few more days, and it's wild and woolly.
Great, thank you. Any questions for her? And then we have Senator Gildon's aide, Kaylin Jetson here. Thank you.
I just had budget stuff as well, but that's been touched on quite heavily, and I think Representative Jacobson probably did it more in detail than I could have. He just wanted to know everything's looking good to end on schedule Thursday night. Doesn't look like there should be need for a special session at this point. And that he will have kind of a written, more detailed overview of how session went to send out to y'all kind of post-session. Yeah, I think Gateway got funded with that $430 million gap. So we're excited about that.
I have a question.
Sorry,
Cindy, go ahead.
Well, I just want to add, it's really great to work. The team from the 25th, it's just really great to work with. As I'm getting down there and I'm seeing that not all the delegations work together. I'm like, what's up with that? So I'm just happy that we have such great people to work with. And it's just been a pleasure in that regard.
Go ahead, Sarah.
All right. So my question was, where did we end up with police and safety and anything on the bills giving us anything better? My car got broken into. So I've joined the club now. So
we didn't do anything about the catalytic converter theft. We just did a study, which was annoying. We think that we've got the and I'm not good with the terms on this. I always bring Eric Robertson with me, but we think we've got the part about where they cannot detain folks for a mentally ill bad day. We think we've got that part fixed. We think that we have the probable cause versus reasonable suspicion fixed. And so that's good. And we were hearing people from the floor say, we didn't know this would happen this way once we passed all these laws, which were well-intentioned, but basically handcuffed police. So we've got a couple parts of it fixed. There's more to do. And we'll see how it all ends out.
So one of those is then the right to pursue?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
And Kaylin, did Chris send along anything about that to talk about?
No, but I thought that might have been one that Governor signed already. It did change right to pursue, and it changed probable cause back to reasonable suspicion. And I thought that already went to the governor. I was just trying to find where I saw that.
Yeah, that's my recollection as well, is that we did tackle that and get it through.
Yeah, I'll try to see what I can do to shed some light for the next GAC around public safety. That definitely, came up at our 12 at 12, which is our CEO chat. That was the main topic of conversation. It's obviously just riddled our neighborhoods and some of us so close to home, and is such a concern. So I will see what I can do to provide some more information too, and maybe ask our representatives to who I should tap into as well, or I'm sure you'll know more.
I will prepare myself a term paper basically of what we did in the legislative session, and I'll have it in front of me, but I have some, I don't have a complete picture because it's hard because it changes minute to minute. So thank you.
I get it. I get it. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. All right. We have Meredith Neal from the city of Puyallup that we will go to next.
Great. Well, I'll try to keep this pretty quick. So as Shawn Egan talked about, remodeling the house, all the not exciting but necessary things. One of ours was our Milwaukee Bridge project, and we just had the ribbon cutting for that. And what was amazing was that we had 100 people come to the ribbon cutting from the community. So while it's not a very flashy project, rebuilding a bridge that was desperately in need of repair, the community was super excited about it. Representative Strickland was there. And I know I've been hearing for the last week, all of the car dealerships have been saying how thrilled they are because they can actually get in and out of their lots again now, and the traffic's not building up around the interchange over the river there. So that was a pretty exciting thing, even though it is not super flashy. Let's see, we also, our food truck pilot program is in the process of becoming permanent right now. And we are excited to work again with the Washington Food Truck Association. So we'll be having Food Truck Fridays again this summer here in Puyallup. So that's going to start up June 3rd and go throughout the summer until the end of September. And so we'll have 2 food trucks every Friday here across from City Hall. It's been great to sort of get to know the food truck operators and see some of them starting to take up spaces, brick and mortar spaces. And so sort of watching that growth of some of our vendors. Let's see, on our downtown redevelopment efforts, there's been, a lot of really exciting stuff happening with the AOB lot that the developer Point Ruston, Lauren Cohen, is in the process of working his way through permitting on that project. And then there are a number of other properties in the downtown area that we're seeing pre-apps on right now for higher density multifamily housing. So it's kind of exciting to see that some of that work that the council had done to sort of start the redevelopment process is picking up steam. And it looks like we should see a lot of new residents a few years from now in downtown. Also, the city's Cornforth Campbell property, we're starting to talk about redevelopment plans for that in hopes that maybe the Department of Ecology might sign off on a no further action letter at some point soon. So stay tuned on that, and I'll certainly provide an update. Happy to pass it over to Councilmember King, our newest council member, if he has anything he wants to share, or Jeff Wilson.
Yeah, bless his heart. He was very excited to update us. However, his audio and camera are not working. So I did mention that I would let you know that. And yeah, congratulations. I'm excited to hear how his first 2 months have gone. And as you can see, he's messaging us. Sorry, everyone, next time. But Jeff Wilson, anything from the exciting world of permitting?
Oh, well, there probably is. I don't know if I have a lot to tell. I mean, it's kind of my second week back in the office since I've been out since late December. So I'm just getting caught up on everything. But probably 2 things that are important to note. One is that we're going back to the council for a second reading. Earlier in the year, we had passed an ordinance or late last year, passed an ordinance to defer impact fees for transportation and park impact fees for new development. But we did not do anything with our system development charges. So beginning of this year, council wanted to take up that issue again. So we had first reading of ordinance at our meeting last week, which was then moved to second reading. So what we'll provide the same option for deferral of system development charges related to sewer and water only, not for storm drainage, but that'll come up for second reading. So that'll help kind of defray some cost to a later point in time in the process as new development occurs. Probably the biggest thing that we're starting to work on, and I mean, I know a lot of people talked about what they're doing with their housing action plans, what they're doing with a number of different things that are coming up in their comp plans, is we're beginning our efforts now for the 2024 comp plan update. We're starting by initially doing some outreach with all the department heads to find out some issues, and then we'll start developing a plan for public outreach later this year to start working on the 2024 update. Primarily looking at what are we going to do to address and implement the housing action plans. This will be look at not only what we do in our comp plan to update our policies and where we may change densities and how we're going to deal with growth. At the same time, run a companion amendment to update our development regulations so that our development regulations are actually tailored to allow us to succeed what we want to accomplish in the comp plan. So we'll look to simplify the things that we can simplify, streamline the processes so we can actually achieve the goals that we're setting out in our comprehensive plans. That'll be a big effort. It's not a near-term effort, but it's mid-2024, depending. I think there's a bill still alive. I'm not sure that would delay adoption of the 2024 comp plan amendments from June until December of that year, which gives us an additional 6 months, which is always good, especially if there are any changes coming out related to what we do have to do under GMA. And I know right now we're also in the works with Pierce County because the biggest issue is population allocations over the next, under the 2050 PSRC plan, PSRC plan, to see how that may impact, because that'll drive a lot what we do in our comprehensive plan. So there are a lot of projects that are occurring in town. I just haven't been able to catch up on all of those yet. So I'm trying to get caught up on the big things first, and then I get into the weeds on the daily stuff. So, but I'm happy if anybody has any questions, please reach out to me and I can find answers for anything that they may want to know.
Awesome. Great, thank you. All right, let's go to county. I know we're 9:01, but let's County Councilman Dave Morrell. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Tara. Appreciate the opportunity to listen in to everybody's program and everybody's challenges out there. With the county, we have the same, but I'd like to start out with a big shout out to Pierce County Economic Development Department. The small but mighty won the WEDA 2022 Innovation Award with the Business Accelerator Program. So that was a huge win for Pierce County, Betty Capistani and her team. And that program is unique. It supports equity to our BIPOC population, veterans, women, and rural entrepreneurs. So that's a great win. That program is funded there again by ARPA money. So we were able to develop that program and push it out relatively quick with a lot of great partners. With that, the county just completed its 2022 retreat, concentrating on a lot of different subjects. And you'll see that coming forward in our 2023 goals that include affordable, attainable housing, homelessness, addressing some of the climate issues, as it was stated by the previous speaker, that the 2024 GMA requirements are coming out, and yes, population disbursement, especially with our cities, is going to be real important to see how the county fares outside the UGA as far as population allocations go. But one of the good things about it, if you haven't heard, the COVID requirements are going away as far as the governor is concerned on the 12th, which will allow us to open up a lot of facilities at the county. The key one is our jail. One of the challenges that we've had through this whole pandemic have been the reduction within the jail due to social distancing. So we'll be able to open it up, and we have going to work with prosecutors, judges, law enforcement to go out and get the bad guys and start locking them up again. So no more catch and release. So we're looking forward to that. Pertaining to the homeless plan, the council put a goal together 2 years ago to end homelessness, in probably a little over exaggeration, but On March 15th, that plan will come before the council with probably a couple of amendments, but that will pass. And this will be the largest one-time investment that Pierce County has ever done to help the homeless situation in Pierce County. So looking forward to that. A lot of other exciting things. I sit on the board of the health department. We launched our food safety rating program, and the new signs are appearing all over Pierce County. So the food establishments are now getting rated. And so that will be interesting to see how that moves forward. I think everyone now has a great sign on their window. But as things change and they get inspected, that those ratings will probably change. We're hoping they don't. So anyway, other than that, that's my 60-second speech, and I'm sticking with it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I looks like Betty Capistani might have had to bounce out, but we did not know about that award. So thanks for that announcement, and we'll be sure to share it. That's great.
You're welcome.
All right, folks. Well, hey, I hope, I think we've started off our week great. Let's hope it continues for the rest of the week. Thanks for your support here. And again, be sure to reply to my email if you'd like to sign on to the GoRail or letter. And we shall see you next month. Thanks again, Shawn. Appreciate you both being here. Bye, everyone.